Welcome, everybody. I am Dr. Terry Wager, part of the Organizational Health Collective, principal consultant for Generator Consulting. Doug is ill this week, and so he's not going to be here, but instead we upgraded to Zac Wilcox, another member of Organizational Health Collective, and we are super excited to have him. And we called today, Join Our Adventure as we enter the danger, because Zac is all about entering the danger. Zac, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll talk about the danger. And
thanks for having me, Terry. I'm excited to be here. I don't know that I'm an upgrade on Doug, but I appreciate being here. Doug, if you're watching, I hope you feel better, my friend. A little bit about me. I was born in Australia, lived in Thailand for 8.5 years. Now I live here in the States, in Wisconsin. Started consulting about 4 years ago. And as you mentioned, Terry, I'm very passionate about entering the danger, which is just this idea, the way that I use it, of having healthy conflict and being able to have difficult conversations with people, hold people accountable. Those kinds of things are all very related.
And so why is that so important to you?
There's two main reasons. The first one is I think it's just done very poorly in general. Especially where I come from, I worked for a lot of my career before I started my business in faith-based nonprofits, and terrible experiences having difficult conversations. I think by and large, I'm going to make a very big generalization here that churches and other Christian nonprofits are pretty terrible at it. And so from that perspective, kind of growing up in that, and I saw the pain that it caused. And the other side is very personal to me, but I got divorced 2 years ago, and a big part of the reason, in my estimation, is just because we didn't have conflict at all, let alone healthy conflict. It wasn't unhealthy, which in many ways is very unhealthy because you're not having it. It's another type of dysfunction. But so from that perspective, hopefully helping people figure out, man, how can I have an argument with my girlfriend or boyfriend or husband or wife? That's another piece to it that's much more personal than business related.
So you're telling me that churches really don't function well because they don't have conflict?
By and large, yes. I would say that a lot of dysfunction in churches, in my estimation, is from a lack of conflict.
Absolutely. Well, but they're all believers, and so if they're all believers and they're all focusing on the same thing, why can't they just not have to have conflict? I don't understand that.
Yeah, I think it's this might be true with other faiths as well. I don't know. I can only speak for my own, but coming from Christianity, there is this idea. Well, not this idea. God does tell us in the Bible to love other people, and Christians take that too far, I think, and distort this view of love, which means that we have to be really nice to everyone. And so, if I tell someone, hey, you're not supposed to do this thing, this isn't the objective that we're trying to achieve, or hey, we said we weren't going to yell in meetings and you're yelling in a meeting, or hey, remember how you said you were going to have this project done by the end of the week and it's the end of the week and you don't have it done. Those things they're not nice, because it's not nice to say. It feels difficult, it's uncomfortable, and they translate that to being unloving and to being unkind. And when really what they're trying to be is nice, and there's a huge chasm between being nice and being kind. But because being kind, as you know, Terry, is saying, hey, this project was supposed to be done, you didn't get it done, what gives? In a kind way. You don't have to be blunt about it like I was just now, although sometimes you can be. And so it's not, but because you could apply this really, I mean, this is true in a lot of organizations, right? So you could talk about any group of people that have the same underlying values. It's never easy to have healthy conflict. It's never an easy thing to do, but I think because this this idea, this Christian idea of love your neighbor comes into it, that gets translated into being nice. That's what I mean.
Absolutely. And I think about that. And I mean, I run into it with the different businesses. I work with a lot of quick serve restaurants, and I work with, construction companies and automotive companies. I work with all kinds of different companies.
Yeah.
And I haven't played with the faith-based groups yet, because, well, they scare me. But
Yeah.
no, so I avoid the conflict. But but no, I just haven't had the opportunity to work with them. But I think that the reality that I have seen with all of them is they avoid the conflict, or they avoid the danger of getting triggered themselves. And what happens is they use nice, and they use we're supposed to love each other as rationalization to not bring attention to the fact that we're not doing what we're supposed to.
Yep.
And then the next thing that happens is resentment builds.
Yep.
Which is even less nice than a gentle confrontation, I think.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, because we so convinced, I think, that this short-term pain that we're going to cause them is unloving and unkind, as you just said, forgetting that if we ignore it, it's going to cause actual pain, really long-term, much more difficult pain to work through when it comes to bitterness or resentment, or they might get fired, or you might get fired, or who knows what happens as a result of this. But yeah, it's kind of terrible. And this isn't unique to faith-based organizations. I think it's just amplified from my experience.
I think it's in person-based organizations, and so if you just got rid of all the people, we probably not have a problem with the problem is that no matter how many processes you have, and no matter how much automation that you create in your business, people still have to flip the switch to automate it.
Yeah.
And then everybody's going to have an opinion on when you flip the switch, or how you flip the switch, or what switch you're going to flip. And so then we have the conflict again. It seems like we can't get rid of the conflict. And so, shifting focus for a second, I was in a quick serve restaurant the other day, working with a team, and there's a big thing about standards, and there's a big thing about uniforms, and there's a big thing about consistency. And I'm sitting in there going, okay, this person's out of uniform, that person's out of uniform, this person's not wearing an apron, this person has sweats on, what's going on there? And it's like, okay, it's my job to bring this up, but then it's the owner's job to bring it up to the manager, and the manager's job to bring it up to the employee. And at what point in that shift do we do that? And then, oh, wait a minute, it's 3 people out of uniform.
Yep.
Oh, wait a minute, there's also a whole bunch of other standards that are being missed. And so where does it come from, and how do we start confronting this stuff? Because I'm talking about a quick serve restaurant where I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things, and it just continues to mount up.
Yeah.
And it's like, in a business and religion is business. The business of a church is a business. It's just a nonprofit business, and the business of saving souls. But that business still, 1, 2, 3 things pop up, and then how do we actually enter that danger? And when is it right to enter the danger, and when is it right to step away from it?
Yeah. There's not an easy answer to that. I wish I had an easy answer, but I would say,
come on, Zach.
I would say the first thing that comes to mind, especially with the story that you brought up, is consistency. You have to be consistent in it. So to tell another story, I worked in quick serve restaurants, for a lot of my career before I started consulting. And there was one restaurant I was working for, and I was hired as a manager. I came in as a manager, didn't know the team, but I was getting to know them, and realized pretty quickly that uniform standards weren't being upheld. And that's part of my job as the manager, is to uphold these standards. So I started reminding people, hey, you're not allowed to wear your nose rings when you're operating, like when you're working around food. You have to make sure that you have the non-slip shoes. You have to your hair has to be done up in the right. Like, I had to start doing all of these different kinds of things. The problem was none of the other managers were, or if they were doing it once a week instead of every single time it happened. Because that's the difference. And so I came in, and because I was the only one doing it, rightfully, they had resentment against me because no one else on the team on the management team was saying anything about it. So of course they're going to be upset at me because I'm, this guy who comes in and just starts changing the rules because I was changing the set rules that were there, not the rules that they were supposed to be held to, the rules that were established and were being.
I got to interrupt and just say I want you to go back to this, but I got to say that is so important. Is the idea of here's the standard rules that we have agreed upon, that we wrote down and we put in a book somewhere. But here's the rules that we live by day to day.
Yeah, yeah.
And the funny thing is they are not the same.
No. Yeah, yeah.
And so,
absolutely.
Go on.
Yeah, and so, sorry,
I caught you during your drink.
You did. Yeah, but that idea of, because I could have just gone along with everyone else and just kind of softly, hey, I remember you're not supposed to wear your nose ring, and then just let it go. But I would say that to kind of get back, like, to how it gets done with things like that, when it's clear standard issues, that's a part of the reason why accountability, I think, is so tough, because you have to, it's not just, you can't just say it once, you have to say it every single day. And it's exhausting. I can tell you, I was exhausted. But if you're not willing to do that, like, that is the job of teams and leaders. When you join a team, when you sign up to be a leader, you're essentially saying, I'm choosing to be exhausted by this. Unless you're a galvanizer. If you know the 6 types of working genius, maybe that doesn't exhaust you. I have galvanizing as a frustration, so I can't speak to that very much. But I think that is really the first step, and doing it publicly too, I would say. So in this situation, when I said to one person, hey, don't wear your nose ring when you're around food, that's a reminder to everyone else too, oh, I'm not supposed to wear my nose ring. And so if you do it, I was brought up with this idea that you should correct in private and praise in public. There are some cases when that's true. But 99% of the time, I actually think the opposite should be the case, because not only are you losing opportunities to coach this person, but when you do it in private, like, everyone else is losing out on that opportunity of coaching as well. And it's also, they don't know if it's happened. And so, well, did this get taught? Because everyone knows the behavior. If we say this is the standard, this person isn't being the standard, everyone knows it. I promise you, even if they don't say anything, they do know it. And so when you don't address it, like, and everyone doesn't know you've addressed it. So when you just take him aside, hey, we just have to talk. Remember, you can't do this thing. You're talking quietly. Then no one knows. I'm like, well, is he going to talk about it? And then that just destroys morale for the rest of the team as well. So I probably went off maybe in a different tangent.
No, I absolutely love what you're saying there, and I'm a big fan of bringing things to people's attention in a group. Whether it's a board meeting and you're going, hey, why are you looking at your phone? Or in the quick serve restaurant, hey, why aren't you wearing your apron? Or why do you have holes in your shoes where you can actually have your foot burned in some way? It's like, we're bringing it to their attention. And, a lot of people talk about shame being a bad thing. I think it's a very good thing. I think pervasive shame is a bad thing, but shame is a curative emotion that we have, and people don't want to trigger shame in anyone. And and we end up all walking on eggshells. And when we do the remodel of the restaurant, we end up putting eggshell floors on, and we're all afraid to actually bring to attention this problem. Whether it's a quick serve restaurant or a boardroom, seems like we put eggshells in every room in the house or the office, and everybody's tentatively walking around hoping we don't upset each other. And it's very hard to get anything done. Yeah,
it really, and I think in some ways it's because it feels uncomfortable. It's not easy. I'm going to keep using the same example. It's not easy for me to go up to someone and say, hey, remember, you're not supposed to have your nose ring in when you're around food. But that's because we so often have this extremely short-sighted view of accountability, not realizing that, hey, this is here not only for my benefit and your benefit, but for the benefit of the whole community, the community being the people that work here and the people that come and eat here.
Absolutely.
Because if you leave your nose ring in and it falls into the food, someone's going to eat it out there. That's really gross. They're going to sue us. We're going to have to shut down the restaurant. Everyone loses their job and no one can come and eat here anymore. It's that kind of a thing where you step back and be like, oh, this is going to be a really uncomfortable 20-second conversation for me, but they're not going to care long term because they know what the rules are. It might be as simple as, oh, I forgot it's in there. And then we can move on and we don't have to worry about all of those issues. So So I think that is another one, is because we're so focused on the here and now, and I want to feel good now, and I want to feel right now, and this is going to be uncomfortable. Instead of looking at this long-term view, it is hard, I think, to be disciplined in the way that we have difficult conversations.
Yeah, one of the other things I think about, and this can apply in faith-based organizations, businesses of any size, and quick serve restaurants, we see it a lot, is hiring for coverage rather than culture, or
Yes.
filling the board seat because it's empty, instead of finding somebody
Yep.
who's really going to add to the group in some way.
Yep.
And so we end up, well, do they have a pulse? Okay.
Yep.
Can they work a weekend, or do they say they can work a weekend?
Yep.
This is great. Yeah, I can work weekends. Great, you're hired. Okay, great. I can't work weekends. What?
Yeah.
I can only work days
Yeah.
from 3 to 6. They're like, well, now I have them on my roster, and it costs money to let them go and get another person on there, so I got to work with this. And people end up stuck in this, well, now I have to keep them.
Yep.
And I have to work around all of these people. And instead of creating a culture,
Yeah.
we actually defaulted to the culture that was created by us not really paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah. And
culture.
if you guys want a tip out there, if you're not aware of this, you don't have to keep them. Make them available to the marketplace, and you will be better, and they will be better. But that's another difficult conversation that's it's not easy to have. And I also don't know that I would say that you have to fire them right away. I would just say, hey, make it very clear what changes they're going to have to make.
Oh, absolutely.
And then, which I don't think you were insinuating by any means.
Fire them all quick.
But but the opposite of, like, so I think there's three very basic choices you can make. The one that you mentioned, which is letting them create the culture. There's firing them. And then I think there's the third option, which I think we both know is there, but helping them understand what the culture is, and helping them see how it's going to benefit them and everyone else in the long term. That way you get to keep this person and they get to learn and grow and change. I think that I don't know that this is at the heart of a fear of conflict, but I definitely think one piece of it is a scarcity mindset. And this affects us in hiring. This affects us when we have difficult conversations, because what if they leave and I don't have any more friends anymore, or whatever but having this scarcity mindset of, hey, they've got a pulse, let's bring them in because I need someone, I need something, because there's only 10 people and I need all 10 of them, so I have to hire the first 10. Like, that's not how it works. So I think shifting to an abundance mindset can really help you in that. It doesn't solve all the problems, but I think it can help work through some of those issues.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I really do. I think, and I'm going to say it again, is this idea of abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset. And the reality is, where I go with that, and when I'm working with people, I go from that idea of really creating that vulnerability-based trust, and the vulnerability-based trust in myself, that there is abundance, that we are okay, and that we can develop what we're looking for rather than be a victim of it.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is people so often go from, well, if I don't find anybody, then I'm going to have to do it. Well, that's a bad way to look at it in the first place, because I should be willing to step into it. If I'm the owner of it, or if I'm the manager of it, I can do any of it just as well. But I have to be able to also inspire and motivate others to be able to do it. And so if I'm in scarcity and I'm bringing in people out of a fear, then I'm going to bring in a bunch of people without really being intentional about what I'm looking for and what that's going to look like with them in the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said something there that reminded me of something that I've kind of been learning and growing in a lot. And so I'm gonna start out by saying servant leadership, and that's a thing that's thrown around everywhere. But I think deeper than that, servant leadership is identifying what are the obstacles in the way of our team and getting rid of them so that they can be successful. And I think sometimes, as you just said, that is jumping in and doing some of the nitty-gritty stuff that might not be a part of your day. It might be having this difficult conversation because maybe the obstacle is the fact they don't realize that this behavior they have is totally screwing them over. Or it might be not hiring this person, because if you hire this person, that is going to be a huge obstacle to them because they don't fit the culture, they don't fit the team, that they're actually going to slow everyone down. It might be creating 3 new positions, but I think most leaders don't necessarily see that as their job. Is what are the obstacles in the way for making my team and my organization successful, and let's move them out of the way. Often that's just behavioral change, and because culture, in my opinion, is set primarily by the behaviors of the people in the organization. What behaviors are we allowing? What behaviors are we encouraging? And that is a big part of the responsibility of leaders is behavior change, which in many times starts with difficult conversations. Hey, we're not going to allow this behavior anymore, even though it has been. It's not going to be allowed anymore.
Yeah, well said. And I think that there's also this idea of you were talking about servant leadership, and Starbucks, for all the years that Christine was involved in Starbucks, they work with situational leadership, and I think that there's a balance between servant leadership and situational leadership, and all leadership is basically coming from a place of how am I inspiring, motivating, educating, and getting everybody to work together in one direction.
Yeah.
And in situations, it's like, okay, what's going on now that we need to actually change and adapt. At the same time, servant leadership is how can I actually make them successful? And my brief overview of those, I would go read a book on those because there's so much more to it. But when you think about servant leadership, it's not just being subservient and not just being I am dominated by these people and I got to serve them in order to lead. It's really being able to meet them where they're at and inspire them to step forward. And in situational leadership, knowing what to do and how to do it to get the best from each person. And a big piece of it is being able to, in situations, bring it to the attention what's not working.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're of the most service to our people when we're pointing out the things that are in the way of success.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. To keep using the restaurant example, my team sometimes would ask when we're closing, they would say, Zach, why don't you ever do any of the actual cleaning? Which wasn't true because I did do some of the cleaning, but my answer was, if I'm not making sure the cleaning is getting done, we're not getting out of here, because my job is to, when you say this is clean, I got to go make sure it's actually clean so animals aren't going to get in and start pooping all over the place, because that's not good. Right. And so it's in that situation, it's not my job to get down in the nitty gritty. It's not my job to do the job for them. But the way that I'm serving them, the way that in that situation, the way that I'm leading is by, okay, this is done. Great. Let's check it off. Okay, this is done. Great. Oh, no one's doing this. Okay, great. Because it's more like an orchestra in that sense. So yeah, and that can be difficult. That is because there are a lot of times when I felt guilty in those moments, like, oh, I'm not doing anything. But I was doing something. It's just what's required of me is very different than what's required of everyone else, which is why I was also the one that had to tell. There was a this is a very different story, but there was a guy that worked for me. He's a great guy. I love him, but he was terrible at smiling. And you're working in customer service, you have to smile. You'll be like, oh, hi, how's it going? Welcome in. And I remember once I talked to him. I said, hey, you got to learn how, you got to smile better. He's like, okay, great. And I saw him on the register the next time, and it was kind of this like, it was this awkward smile. I'm like, okay, we got to work on that again. So I had to go back, and that's a really uncomfortable conversation to have. Like, hey, you got to learn, like, the smiling thing is not, like, that was really uncomfortable for me, but the relationship that I built with him, and he knew that I'm trying to help him and help the team as a whole. When you can come to it from that perspective, then having those difficult conversations becomes so much easier than if I just was kind of domineering over him. And if it felt like I was just lording over him, if I didn't have that relationship, then it would be almost impossible for me to have that same conversation content wise.
Yeah, something as simple as a smile. Another one that I've seen people have to deal with, and it doesn't matter what business it is body odor. How do you approach that one? It's like, oh my God, or too much perfume. It's like, how do you? We got to,
Yep.
there's tact and timing in everything.
Yep.
But the problem that I find, and you may be able to speak to this too, is the idea of we tend to not enter the danger by talking ourselves out of it by saying, you know what, now is not the time.
Yep.
So I need to pick a better time. And so I'm going to pick my battles, or I'm going to pick my time, and I'll come back to it later.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what's wrong with that?
Yeah. I'll say, look, sometimes it isn't the time. There are occasions when it isn't the time. For like going back to the earlier in the conversation when I said 99% of the time you say stuff in public, body odor is not one of those things that I would talk about in front of other people. That's something where you do take them aside, because that's a very societally is not a comfortable thing to talk about. And if I brought that up and everyone, hey, Terry, did you know that you smell real bad? Like, that would not be good. And even if I used the best,
I was in the gym.
if I'm doing that in a group of other people, it's not going to go well. So I would say very rarely there are times when, yes, wait, pull them aside after the meeting, pull them aside later. Hey, just so you know. But also, we've probably, in that situation, we've probably waited too long anyway. Because if you're having to talk to someone about body odor, it's probably something that you've noticed, and you're like, it's gotten to the point where, oh, this is just so bad, and it's so constant all the time that you're having to try to convince yourself, and so I would say that even
everybody's showing up with nose plugs.
Exactly. For the rest of the 99%, really, like, addressing it right on is almost always the best thing, because it's easier in the moment, and it's much more difficult after the moment. Because if we're in a meeting together, Terry, and you're on your phone, I can just say, hey, like, what's going on? Like, what's going on? And I would ask with genuine curiosity, hey, is everything okay? Because maybe I have no idea. Maybe you just found out that Christine was in an accident and she's in the hospital now, and you need to, like, I don't know. Or it might be like, no, I was just responding to an email. Well, let's do that after, and so it helps if you respond with curiosity. That's generally what I like to. Now, there are times when it's not okay if you just start cussing at people, right? Hey, that's not okay. You need to leave. We're going to talk about it later. But like, addressing whichever behavior it is in the moment is really important. Even if you don't have the full conversation right away, addressing it in some way, saying, hey, this behavior isn't acceptable. We can't take time out of the meeting to talk about it right now, but remember, we're not supposed to be on our phone. We've talked about it. Let's meet again in half an hour. That will kind of give you, because you also don't want to go into it when you're feeling really frustrated. I was having a meeting with some colleagues last week, and they were, in my opinion, and I still think that we're being unfair and kind of dismissive of me, but in what they were telling me. And so I just said, hey, if I respond right now, it's not going to be good. I'm going to respond really poorly. I'm going to say things that I shouldn't. Let's take a break and talk about it later. And so I think there are times when that's okay, but I'm still addressing it. I'm just saying, hey, I hear you. I can't respond now because I'm not in the right place emotionally. And so when it comes to pushing it off, you still have to address it in some way. I don't know if I've muddied the water instead of making it more clear, Terry, but that's kind of.
No, I think it's very clear. And I'll wrap up with this idea that you were very clear. But the idea is, if it's going to get in the way of progress, it's probably not really good to point it out right then. And the way I think about it is, like, if that particular person is with a client or customer facing, maybe not the best time.
Yeah.
But if it's going to actually benefit the team, and I always think about the idea of whatever problem you got, it's kind of like a basketball player with their shoe untied. You want to let them know, because they're running down the court and somebody's going to step on it and it's going to trip them.
Yeah.
And so think of any of the problems that we're really pointing out as, hey, you're going to trip on that shoelace,
Yeah.
and bring it to their attention. And then if they're not making the change, then it kind of escalates into what we have to actually talk about in that coaching conversation. The last thing I think about is like the idea of whatever conversations we're having. Alan Mullally talked about loving them up or loving them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or loving them up until they're loved out. And so the idea of no matter what we're doing, we're trying to build the people and we're trying to grow the people. And every time we enter the danger, it's how am I actually bringing and adding to this situation, even though it's a confrontation, to make everybody better, to make everybody feel a part of, to make everybody feel included, and to get everybody to work towards the standards.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And there might be times too when you have those conversations where you don't know how to have it. I remember the first time I had to have a conversation with someone about their body odor. I was like, I have no idea how to have this conversation. So I just said that. I'm like, hey, I really don't know how to have this conversation. I'm not sure what to say. I don't know how to say it well. And then I just went for it. I don't remember exactly what I remember. I started with that. I probably said something like, are you aware that you smell bad sometimes or something? I don't remember.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. And the reality is people might be at first, but after a while, after they calm down, they thank you for it.
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest thing is when we enter the danger, and then we gotta cut this. We can keep talking for this for a long time, and I think you should come back on the show with me and Doug. But I think whenever we're at that place where danger is right there, we want to step in.
Yep.
And we want to step in and we want to put our hand up saying, it's uncomfortable for me too.
Yep.
I'm right there with you. And the more we enter, the better off we're all going to be, because what we're actually entering is, and the danger is being vulnerable to the conflict in order to achieve more together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I actually forgot what time we're supposed to end. Are we out of? Was it supposed to?
We are out of time.
Okay.
And so thank you, everybody. We will see you next Monday at the same time as this week, because I don't remember what time it is. We've got 3 different time zones going on. So anyway, we appreciate you watching Organizational Health Collective. We want you to join if you are an organizational health consultant. We want you to come check us out, be a part of what we're doing. And if you're looking to make your organization more healthy, reach out to us at the Organizational Health Collective, or me, Dr. Terry Wager at Generator Consulting, Doug, my good friend at People Smart, or Zac at, what is your organization called, Zac?
I was very creative. Wilcox Consulting. So Zac
Wilcox Consulting.
Wilcox Consulting.
Absolutely. Reach out to any one of us, and we will see what we can do to help you have a stronger, healthier organization. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.